Rough Ridge Lookout is one of the best spots to visit in the Linville area. It offers beautiful panoramic views of the mountains, as well as a great view of the viaduct, which is the cool bridge that runs along the side of the mountain. There is one main parking area for Rough Ridge Lookout, but there is not actually a dedicated trail to the summit. It is accessed via the Tonawah Trail, which is a 13.5-mile trail that runs primarily along the parkway. There are many points of interest along this trail, and it can be accessed from many spots. So if you are someone who likes to hike longer distances, you have plenty of options for where to start and end your hike along the trail. However, it is only 0.6 of a mile to the top of Rough Ridge, and is only a quarter mile to the first beautiful panoramic view. The trail up is moderately strenuous, with some small rocks you will have to traverse over. Since this is one of the best hikes in the area, it is also one of the busiest, especially in the fall when the leaves change. The parking lot for the Rough Ridge Lookout is located on the Blue Ridge Parkway near mile marker 303 between Linville and Blowing Rock, North Carolina. It is much easier to spot when coming from the west, as you will cross a fairly long uphill bridge shortly before reaching it. There are just a couple more curves after the bridge before you will see the parking lot on your left. When coming from the east, there is a short, much less distinguishable bridge that curves to the left shortly before you get there. But the main thing that will let you know that you are in the correct spot is the short stone wall on the left. The parking lot is fairly small. It can only hold about 15 to 20 cars, so it is very common to see cars parallel parked well down the road from it. If for any reason you are not able to find anywhere to park near this parking lot, you could park at the Wilson Creek Overlook, which is about a half-mile west. There's a very small parking area at this overlook, but there should be a lot fewer cars at it. It is also not very well marked. If you are driving west to it from the main parking lot, it will sneak up on you on your left as you are crossing a bridge that curves to the left. If you start from here, you will need to go 0.8 of a mile up the other side of Rough Ridge to reach the summit. Unfortunately, there are no cool overlooks on that side of the ridge, so you will have to hike down the other side in order to see the other cool spots that are closer to the main parking lot. I'll cover this portion of the trail towards the end of my trail walkthrough. Another alternative if Rough Ridge is too crowded is Beacon Heights, which is another couple miles west on the parkway. It is a short, easy hike that offers great views. It is generally less busy than Rough Ridge, but it still does not have much parking. There is a link to my video of Beacon Heights in the description and at the end of this video. You may even decide to do both hikes since they are both short. There are no restrooms at the Rough Ridge trailhead. There are, however, restrooms at the Price Park picnic area, which is located on the parkway 7.2 miles east of the Rough Ridge parking lot. There is also a rest area about 2 miles past the Price Park picnic area on US 221. However, if you need restrooms, you are probably better off going to the city of Linville, as it is only about 5 miles west. This hike is generally good for kids, as the trail itself is not very dangerous. There are, however, several spots where you can go out onto huge rocks. You want to keep a close eye on kids in these spots, as there are dangerous drop-offs beyond the rocks. This trail is also generally fine for dogs, but the trail is very narrow in some spots, so some dogs may need to be restrained to keep them from bothering other passing hikers. There could be a few spots where small dogs would need to be carried over some of the rocks along the trail. There are no water crossings on the trail, so if you happen to have a dog that does not like water, that will not be a problem. As you can probably already tell, this hike is awesome for photographers. You can get amazing photos in just about every direction you point your camera. You'll of course want to go when there are leaves in the trees, and if you are willing to brave the crowds, you can get breathtaking shots in the fall when the leaves change. The biggest challenge for photographers is fog. This can really put a damper on your photos, and I have honestly not found a great way to determine how foggy it will be before going, so I feel that there is some luck involved. If you do decide to go when the leaves are changing, I recommend getting there as early as you possibly can to try and beat the crowds, especially if you are going on the weekend. What worked for me on a Saturday in the fall was going to an overlook in the parkway early enough to get photos of the sunrise, and then immediately heading over to Rough Ridge. I realize this is not practical for everyone, but just to put it in perspective, on that particular day, I ended up leaving Rough Ridge around noon, and traffic was lined up for at least a half mile leading up to the Rough Ridge parking lot. Keep in mind that you can use US 221 to get around this traffic if you happen to decide to go somewhere beyond Rough Ridge instead. There's also one particularly cool pointed rock that is a popular spot for photos. The drop from this rock is still a bit dangerous, but you are not nearly as high up as the photos will make it look like you are. So people like to get their photo taken while sitting on the edge of the rock with their feet dangling. You may have to wait your turn to do this on busier days though. One more thing that is worth mentioning is the fairly large area of wildflowers that is on the Wilson Creek Overlook side of the ridge. At the right time of year, you can get some really cool photos like these, provided you are okay with having a lot of bees circling around you. They did not mess with me at all on this day though. If you begin the hike from the main parking lot, you will head up a set of steps before reaching the split where you will get onto the Tanawa Trail. You will need to go to the left across the bridge at this sign that for whatever reason does not list the Rough Ridge Lookout. The trail will then start to go uphill at a medium grade over some cool rock steps and through a couple narrow areas for a quarter mile before reaching the first overlook. This first overlook is of course the lowest of the three overlooks, but it is still breathtaking. There are awesome views in almost every direction. The overlooks above this one are better, but they are significantly more cramped. Even if for any reason you do not want to go all the way to the summit, it is worth stopping by for this first overlook alone. The nice wooden walkway does a good job of keeping people away from the edges, but there is one huge rock here that you can walk out onto. This is of course one of the spots where you'll want to keep a close eye on children as there is a significant drop-off. As you continue up the wooden walkway, you can also see a bit of a view in the other direction. There are a couple benches here as well. From this point on, there are several narrow areas where you may have to wait for people going the other way to pass. The trail also gets a little more strenuous as you will have to traverse over a lot of small rocks, but it's still not super steep. After the trail makes a sharp right turn, you will come to the pointed rock that I mentioned earlier. This is where people love to sit on the edge to get cool photos. The trail here is very rocky, so passing people that are stopping at the pointed rock can be a bit awkward. But there is a good spot on the trail just before the rock where you can stand to take photos of friends or family who are on the rock. As I mentioned, there is still a pretty dangerous drop-off from this rock, but it is not nearly as high as it looks. After this, the trail continues to be narrow with a lot of small rocks, as well as a couple larger rocks that are a bit awkward to walk up. You will then reach the summit. The summit does offer the best views on the hike, but you will need to climb the huge rock at the end in order to see it. There is quite a bit of brush on both sides of the trail here, as well as guide wires and signs telling you to stay on the trail, so you will not be able to see very much without climbing the rock. The drop-off on the other side of this huge rock is probably the most dangerous one on the entire hike, but as long as you do not intentionally stand on the edge, you should be pretty safe. People of course enjoy sitting on this rock for an extended period of time to take in the most panoramic views on the hike. That of course also means that it can get quite crowded and you may have to wait your turn. One of my favorite things to see from the top of this huge rock is this rocky part of the mountain with trees growing out of it that juts out towards the viaduct in the distance. This is where most people turn around to go back down to the parking lot. However, as I mentioned, you can continue the trail to the Wilson Creek Overlook and beyond if you want to. The wildflowers I mentioned are also beyond this point. If you do choose to continue the hike, you will need to head down the very narrow trail with tall brush on each side. There's also another little overlook on this side where you can get a good view of Grandfather Mountain. The trail then turns right and starts heading downhill. There are some pretty large, intimidating rocks in this area. As the trail continues, you will come across a few fairly steep, rocky downhill spots. If you were to start the hike from the Wilson Creek Overlook, this is of course the trail you will be going up at the beginning. If it is the right time of year, you will then come to the large area of red and yellow wildflowers. As I said, as long as you are not bothered by the bees, you can get some really cool photos here. I was hoping to spot some hummingbirds when I went for photos, but unfortunately I only found bees. I may not have gone at just the right time. The only downside of this spot is the awkward, narrow, rocky path that goes through them. It makes it a bit more difficult to position yourself for the photos, and it makes it difficult for others to pass. Fortunately though, this is not a heavily trafficked area. The trail continues to be rocky and mostly downhill after this point, but it is not super steep. You will cross a bridge over a creek shortly before reaching the split for the Wilson Creek Overlook. The sign shows you clearly that the Wilson Creek Overlook is to the left. This trail then goes a short distance under the bridge to the other side of the parkway. There are then some steps that take you up to the small parking area that I mentioned earlier. If you decide to hike to this point, you will of course just need to go back the way you came to get back to the main Rough Ridge parking lot, which will make your total distance about 2.5 miles. Thank you for watching. I will leave you with a few more of my favorite clips from Rough Ridge.